Hi everyone, this is Megzubo69 with Take the Red Pill. So we are on question / video number 9, and we only have one more to go after this. So let's get right to it and see what this Theist Lamont map has to say, and probably more than likely it will be just as interesting as the others.
Question number 9, we have two more questions. This one is for Lamont. What is your best or most compelling argument for the existence of God?
Oh, the answer to this one is going to be very interesting, because unless he actually comes up with concrete proof, it's more than likely going to be just speculation, opinions, and just what he thinks. So without further ado, let's see what he has to say.
There's so many of them. I think all of them are equally good. I think the one that I haven't mentioned is, let's see, what's the best one? I'm gonna say protein, right? No, I'm not. I'm gonna say the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Let's go there.
So it seems he has to think about that one, because at first he says, oh, I would have to say the best one is, and then he pauses and has to think about it. Then he says protein, and then he says the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Here's the funny thing about that one. There has not been any proof that the man actually did resurrect. So let's see what he has to say about this one, because coming up with proof on this one, oh, this ought to be very interesting.
The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the best evidence for God that there is. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the most highly documented event in world history. I challenge Jason or anyone else after I'm done here to let me know anything else that's more highly written about than Jesus in antiquity. Like I said, the manuscripts are 1 mile high. So if anyone has any ancient manuscripts that are a mile high, archaeologists would be glad to meet you. But the resurrection of Jesus was talked about by Hierocles, Ignatius, Seneca. These are ancient historians. Trajan, Pliny the Younger, Julius Africanus. I mean, so many people talked about this. There were still people who had witnessed the resurrection in Corinthians. When Paul wrote Corinthians, there were still people alive who had witnessed it. It says in Corinthians, some have fallen asleep, but most are still with us. And think about it, how radical the story is.
Okay, so let me get this straight. He's of the position that just because so many people may have spoken about it after Jesus' death, that lends credence to it? I mean, come on. Look at the story of Superman. People have been talking about that story for quite some time now. Heck, it's in a comic book. Does that lend credence to the fact that Superman is real and that he flies and he can stop bullets? Come on. Really? If that is his point, if that is his angle of coming with supposed proof, then it's weak, very weak. And also, just because in the Bible Paul says that people witnessed it, again, it doesn't mean that people did really witness it. Because if people did really witness it, where are their names mentioned and where are their contemporary accounts of the actual incident happening? There is none. And then it's a radical story. Oh yeah, it surely is a radical story. I mean, it's, you know, that book is full of extraordinary claims. So where is the extraordinary proof? Let's move on.
When Jesus died, it was in the midst of a great philosophical age, a great age of understanding. The Census Bureau says that only 2% of the humans that have ever lived on this planet were alive before the birth of Jesus. But when Jesus died, there was a population explosion, philosophical explosion, scientific explosion, which gives credence to the fact that Jesus came in the fullness of time.
Okay, so it seems like now he's talking a lot of gibberish / garbage. He said only 2% of the human population was alive before Jesus was on earth at the time. And then after Jesus, there was an explosion of people, you know, philosophically, scientifically. How in the world does that lend credence to Jesus being God or the Son of God? How does that lend credence to anything? I mean, the only thing that would possibly make me think is people maybe were happy and so they had more sex. Either that or Jesus must have stuffed all these women to have more population growth, which I would like to see the evidence on that alone that there was a population growth once Jesus came about. Sorry, that is an extraordinary claim. He definitely should have provided some proof for that. Again, no different than what most theists do. They make these claims and have nothing to back up. Go figure.
I challenge each one of you to look up what I'm about to say. The resurrection, there is no extra-biblical, contemporary, anything written about the resurrection for 150 years until after the event. There is not even anything extra-biblical written about Jesus Christ until 80 years later. Except for Josephus. And Josephus, we already know, was tampered with. The resurrection story is not in the original Mark Gospel. You can check that out. And then the Synoptic Gospels, Luke and Matthew, were both were copied from Mark. And then we have a later Gospel, John. The Gospels contradict themselves on the resurrection, and the historians agree that we do not even have close enough to claim that the resurrection is a historical fact. There is no contemporary record of it outside of the Bible. No eyewitnesses wrote about it. We don't even know who wrote the Gospels, or when they wrote it, or if it was even accurate. And there are many other plausible, natural explanations for why the disciples thought they saw what they saw. So be consistent. If you heard of a magic story that was from another book 2,000 years ago, would you even consider believing in it? The Bible says, or the authors, we don't even know who wrote the Gospels. The authors were not added, the names were not added to the Gospels until later. And the Gospels were written in Greek. The disciples spoke Aramaic. So we have this oral retelling about an event called the resurrection. What happens when you play the game of telephone for 40, 50, 60 years? It's going to get changed. And there's going to be a lot of things that happen.
That's time.
So,
You know, Jason made a lot of valid points. I mean, yes, the gospel do contradict themselves, and on the resurrection and on many other things. And, you know, the thing about, for example, the story of Jesus not being written way after, that is true. Nothing about Jesus was written until way, way, way after. And think about this. Somebody tells you one thing, that person tells somebody else, that person tells someone else, and it keeps going down. By the time after 50 people it comes back to you, you may have a whole different story than what you originally said. You know, and then you gotta take a look also at the Council of Nicaea. When that happened in 325 AD, Bishop Constantine was a Roman, but he wanted to keep all the Roman traditions of, you know, pagan worship, worshiping other gods, things of that nature. But yet, since Christianity or the movement of Jesus was gaining momentum, he wanted to incorporate some of these things. And that's the reason you have, like, you know, Easter, Christmas, which of none of those are even reported in the Bible. Those words do not even come up in the Bible. Yet, Christians strongly believe in them, in their dates and accuracy and everything else. This is no different than anything else. The whole story, or the resurrection, and, you know, Lamont Matt basing the authenticity of God and Jesus on the resurrection as proof, that is a seriously far stretch. Very, very far stretch. And so far, just like he's done with everything else, he has not provided a shred of evidence. I mean, he's jumping to these stories now that have nothing to do with the original question asked. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to add also. I mean, there were other books, other quote-unquote holy books that were written way before the Bible was written. And, you know, like the Torah and things of that nature. And look at the other different religions that were written, that wrote books way before the Bible was written. But you don't see them believing or following that, do you?
I also challenge you to look that information up. Jason is absolutely wrong. The Syriac, Coptic, Greek, and Latin were all written in the 1st century. The 1st century after his death.
No, actually, he's the one that's wrong, because not all the stories written about Jesus was written a century after his death, like he said. Second of all, there are no witnesses, no eyewitnesses that wrote anything about Jesus's death. The gospel, according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is exactly that, according to them. They didn't write it. Not to mention the fact, those people who wrote it, they were not even there. So again, there's no contemporary evidence or proof outside of the Bible, which is not really fully contemporary, that witness the whole resurrection thing. So again, he'd have to prove and come up with evidence on that alone. And his claims, again, outlandish, very outlandish.
We have 600 Greek manuscripts. Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars, has 12 manuscripts that were written 1,000 years after the originals. 1,000 years is all we know about Caesar. Is in Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars. Aristotle's Poetics, we have less than 10 manuscripts. The Bible, we have 25,000. And with the Aristotle's Poetics, 1,400 years after the originals it was written. The writings of Socrates, we have 0 manuscripts. We have none. The only thing we know about Socrates is what Plato tells us. Homer's Iliad, 643 manuscripts. It's not a big debate. If he wants to get rid of the Bible on the basis of what he's saying, he has to get rid of all ancient literature.
Okay, his conclusion is based on a flawed premise to begin with. Because here's the thing, Socrates, all these, all those other philosophers, first of all, did not make any extraordinary claims like they can walk on water, heal the sick, or that they're God for that matter. So there's no extraordinary claims that they made which would have to be thrown out. So you cannot compare it to the fables that's written in the Bible. He's right. There's no debate on that, because he actually has no debate to claim to prove the claim of Jesus being God. Nobody does. And so again, that's all he can do is shoot in the wind, see where the spaghetti lies on the wall, because he doesn't have any shred of evidence. And this is one thing that we see from a lot of theists. They will just throw these things out, make up these stories, and kind of divert away from the original question to make it seem like they know a lot. But when you actually look at what is it that they said, it has nothing to do with the topic in the first place. But yet, they sounded good because everybody else who believes the same thing they do followed along and say, oh yeah, this is great, this makes sense. And it doesn't. Anyway, these are the same things again like we see from theists so much, and obviously seen from the map. But there's nothing new there. We will continue on with the next video, the last one, and then go on to other topics still pertaining to the same subject at hand. Is the Bible real? Is God real? And are the miracles purported in there real? So until next time, this is Megzable69 with Take the Red Pill.